as soon as we turn to 3 o'clock, we're going to get underway. What's that? That's right.
You want to get your cup? Want your cup?
The House Armed Services Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces will come to order. I want to thank the members for joining us, thank our witnesses for joining us today, and I appreciate all of the efforts that you've undertaken to be here with us for this important hearing. I want to welcome everyone and let us know that we are on track for a fiscal 2024 budget request from the Army, Navy, United States Marine Corps, Rotary Winged Aviation programs. And I look forward to discussing the progress and challenges of our Rotary Wing communities and how our services are allocating resources to remain at the forefront of Rotary innovation and improving the capabilities of our armed forces. I'm doing my Wascowee Wabbit impression up here. So, our Rotary Wing platforms. We got it. Our Rotary winged platforms play a vital role in our overall force. Oh yeah, Wascowee Wabbit. Yeah, I tell you who I need to get to say it is Rich McCormick down there, because he's been on the stick before. All right, our Rotary wing platforms play a vital role. I'll get it. In our overall force structure, providing unparalleled flexibility and mobility to our warfighters, as well as critical support to humanitarian and disaster relief efforts around the globe. These advanced platforms will ensure that our men and women in uniform have the most cutting-edge and reliable equipment to carry out their missions safely and effectively. However, these modernization initiatives are not without their challenge. For example, as the Army continues its ambitious and aggressive Future Vertical Lift Modernization effort, which aims to develop and field two major platforms simultaneously, we must make sure that they are responsibly using the unique acquisition authorities granted by Congress. I remain concerned about a recent GAO report indicating that the Army is failing to fully meet complete cost estimates, cost assessments, and business cases for the future long-range assault aircraft and future attack reconnaissance aircraft and their associated tactical unmanned aircraft systems. With the fiscal year 2024 future vertical lift request nearing $2 billion, it is vital that the Army demonstrates that they are good stewards of the U.S. tax dollar and identify and fully complete this mission-critical data to make well-informed decisions and set up these acquisition efforts for success. Moreover, I remain deeply committed that by the end of fiscal year 2023, we will have spent $2 billion on the FARA program, yet we still lack an analysis of alternatives, a critical document that ensures major acquisition decisions are based on a thorough evaluation of options. Frankly, it's alarming that there is no AOA for FARA. As the Army considers alternatives and a projected time frame that would deliver in the 2030s, it is hard for me to conceptualize a manned rotary wing aircraft when we are even today proliferating commercial unmanned rotary wing capabilities that would better support at a more effective price point the Army's reconnaissance mission. As for the Army's legacy platforms, I remain concerned with the Army's trepidation in choosing a path forward for the CH-47F Chinook and their lack of any real plan to keep the AH-64E Apache modernized. These platforms will be flying for the next few decades, so it is imperative that our heavy lift and attack fleets are modernized to remain relevant. With the Chinook and the Apache making up the lion's share of the work of the two of the nation's four major rotorcraft sites, I'm growing increasingly concerned about the future health of our rotorcraft industrial base. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on how they plan to steer us away from this oncoming cliff. When it comes to the Navy's rotary fleet, I remain encouraged by the progress of the service life extension, the Navy's MH-60s, and look forward to learning how the Navy plans to proceed with its own future vertical lift needs. Naturally, there are some unique missions that any Navy future rotorcraft is going to need to accomplish, such as anti-submarine warfare, mine countermeasures, and surface warfare, but I see no reason why the Navy cannot take the lessons learned from the Army's efforts to fill overlapping requirements such as ISR, targeting, and logistics support. In this way, they'll find the proper replacement for MH-60s quicker. As for the Marine Corps, I remain encouraged by the maturity of the Marine Corps CH-53K, better known as the Kilo, heavy lift helicopter, and was pleased to see the program recently entered full rate production. This heavy lift helicopter will significantly expand the operational capacity of our Marine Corps, enabling them to transport more cargo, troops, and equipment over greater distances and under challenging conditions. However, with a platform this size and this technology advance, we must keep a constant focus on cost to make sure this program is delivering at an appropriate price point. As the Marine Corps continues down the path of Force Design 2030, which has involved significant cuts to its rotary fleet, I believe it is imperative that we make sure that theater commanders are being fully consulted on all force reductions so requirements do not go unfulfilled, nor is the burden unexpectedly placed on other services. Finally, I believe we must continue to invest in unmanned solutions to augment our manned platforms across all services. The integration of autonomous systems in our rotary wing fleet will enhance mission capabilities while reducing risk to our personnel. By leveraging advances in machine learning and unmanned technologies, we can develop cost-effective, high-performance solutions that will be invaluable in intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and logistics support roles. I look forward to hearing from the services on their differing viewpoints on the role of unmanned platforms and in meeting future rotorcraft requirements. As we embark on this important discussion, I encourage each member on this subcommittee to engage in thoughtful and rigorous debate, bearing in mind the vital role these assets play in ensuring the safety and security of our nation and our allies. We owe it to our service members and the American people to ensure that their resources allocated to our rotary wing programs are used effectively and efficiently. Again, I thank our witnesses for their dedication and commitment to the defense of our nation and for appearing before us today. And now I'd like to yield to my friend and our ranking member from the great state of New Jersey, Mr. Norcross. Don?
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate that. And for the witnesses coming here today, we certainly appreciate it. Rotary wing aircraft have served for generation in diverse combat and logistics support purposes across the military branches. After many years of exceptionally capable and reliable rotary wing aircraft operations, each service has entered a different stage of modernization of its fleets. Successful modernization capable of affordable rotary wing aircraft is essential foundation of the joint force of the future. To this end, the Army will select an innovative tilt rotor aircraft as its future long-range assault aircraft, FLRAA, system, and will transition from a rapid prototype effort to a formal program of record for fiscal year 2024. Subcommittee needs to make better understanding of what risk reduction activities are in front of us as we move towards this milestone. Also, the Army's Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft, FARA, is in early development with its prototype builds underway from 2 prime contractors. However, we understand that this effort is now delayed due to problems with development of the improved turbine engine. I look forward to Secretary Bush providing an update on this effort. I also have to say that I am disappointed in the Army's 24 request. Again, does not fund procurement for the CH-47F Block 2 Chinook 1. I have concerns that the continued delays for the Chinook Block 2 production, compounded with the shutdown of the V-22 construction line, creates a tremendous risk in the industrial base, both of those being in Philadelphia, somewhere between 1,100 and 1,500 workers. So we need to hear the Army's way ahead for the Block 2 Chinook production and stabilization effort taken, or you are going to take to minimize this risk. Turning to the Navy, the fleet's workhorse, the MH-60, has completed procurement. The MH-60s will enter service life extension program in 2023, and the MH-60R will be right behind the S model. We want to hear from the Navy witnesses how they will keep these aircrafts relevant into the next decade. We also want to better understand the Navy's interest and plans, if any, for the future vertical lift and how leveraging the Army's work over the past few years is going forward. For the Marine Corps, I'm pleased to see that the Force Design 2030 analysis validates its need for the CH-53K heavy lift helicopter. Given that the commitment for the 53K last year, Congress authorized block buy authority for the NDAA for 23 and 24 procurement blocks. The exception is that the authority will assist with controlling the program costs. We look forward to hearing what impact the authority has had towards the objective. Also, Secretary Stephanie's perspective on this program would be a good candidate for multi-year procurement authority in future years. I'm concerned, however, about the Marine Corps' AH-1Z Cobra light attack helicopter squadron deviations. I hope that the Marine Corps will meet its global force presence commitment, if necessary, provide sufficient power to the combatant commanders during a period of conflict. Finally, we're interested to know what each service is doing to increase aircraft's survivability. How are you working together to leverage research and investment in our survivability equipment, especially from your common aircraft? Our helicopter pilots and aircrew deserve the best self-protection safety systems that are available. And certainly there are people on our committee who know that firsthand. And I would like to thank you for your upcoming testimony. And Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Norcross. Don, appreciate your reflection there. I think that's a great place to start with our witnesses. We're going to go to Mr. Bush first, and then Major General McCurry, Mr. Stephanie. And I know, Mr. Stephanie, you're going to be giving your briefing here for Lieutenant General Cedarholm and Rear Admiral Lewis L. So, Mr. Bush, we'll begin with you.
Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, and distinguished members of the House Armed Services Committee Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you to discuss the Army's Rotary Wing aviation modernization efforts and the resources requested in the President's budget request for fiscal year 2024. I'm pleased to be joined by my teammate, Major General Michael McCurry, the Commanding General of the United States Army the Aviation Center of Excellence. We appreciate your making our written statement a part of the record for today's hearing. With your support, the Army's fiscal year 2024 budget request gives us the opportunity to maintain critical momentum across the Army's aviation modernization programs. The Army's budget request demonstrates our commitment to the future vertical lift portfolio, composed of the future long-range assault aircraft, future attack reconnaissance aircraft, future tactical unmanned aircraft system, and launched effects to deliver the Army of 2030. It also reflects our keen focus on our enduring fleet by making prudent investments to address safety, obsolescence, and fleet right-sizing during a period of transformational change for the Army's aviation community. In total, the President's budget request for 2024 includes $39.2 billion for overall Army research, development, and procurement. And broken down further, that's $23.4 billion for procurement and $15.8 billion for research. Aviation R&D within that includes $3 billion for procurement and $2 billion for R&D. These resources are balanced between investments for FVL modernization capabilities, ongoing production, and targeted modernization of our current fleet. As part of our modernization strategy, the Army is fully and responsibly, in my view, utilizing new acquisition authorities provided by Congress in recent years, such as the urgent need pathway, middle tier acquisition pathway, software acquisition pathway, to make the Army's acquisition system move much more quickly than in the past. For example, the Army is using the adaptive acquisition framework authorities, in particular middle tier, to deliver FLRAA on an accelerated schedule with appropriate acquisition oversight. The Army executed a down select this past year based on Source Selection Board's thorough review and analysis of proposals. The Source Selection Board, comprised of a comprehensive set of subject matter experts from the requirements community, contracting, logistics, engineering, testing, and program management elements of the Army, determined the successful proposal based on best value to the Army. The Army awarded the FLRAA-based contract in December 2022. for the development of 2 virtual prototypes and options to execute a milestone B in fiscal year 2024. While I know that change in DoD can often be slow, you should know that it can happen and the Army is changing its acquisition approaches, in particular in the area of aviation modernization, to ensure that we are making aviation modernization happen as quickly as possible, but also applying appropriate rigor to make sure it is not being done too fast to lead to programs that could fail in the future. It's a careful balance. In closing, I want to say thank you for the funding provided to support our many modernization efforts in recent years, and we believe the fiscal year 2024 budget request builds on the progress we made across our Army aviation priorities. And Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, when we get to your questions, I have thoughts on all those issues you raised and be happy to share them more at that time.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Appreciate it. Major General McCurry?
Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, thank you for the opportunity to join Honorable Bush and the distinguished senior leaders from our sister services to testify before you today. It is my honor and privilege to represent the more than 55,000 aviation soldiers serving in all 3 components of the total Army force. As the Army Aviation Branch Chief and Force Modernization proponent, I'm in charge of generating current and future readiness by producing highly trained, disciplined, and fit aviation soldiers, developing leaders of character who are experts at combined arms maneuver, and shaping the future aviation force. Last week, we celebrated our 40th anniversary as a branch, and I can assure you and the committee, Mr. Chairman, that our soldiers remain resolute in their commitment to providing the required speed, range, and lethality, enabling the combined arms team and the joint force to win in an increasingly complex world. I take this commitment seriously as both a professional and a personal one. Army aviation starts and ends with the soldier on the ground. It's our sacred trust. I have 2 daughters, a son, and a son-in-law that serve in our Army, in infantry, armor, cavalry, and aviation formations around the world. So both as a leader and a father, I'm all in and committed to working together to make it an unfair fight when our soldiers deploy, and that they have what is needed to fight and win against any adversary, any place, in any environment. Thank you for your tremendous support of our Army, and thank you for the seamless and tireless dialogue that your equally committed staff maintain with us. With your continued support to our soldiers, our families, our civilian workforce, Army Aviation as a part of the land component will continue to dominate the lower tier of the air domain and uphold the sacred trust with the soldier on the ground. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion and your questions.
Very good. Major General McCurry, thank you. Mr. Stephanie, when I go to you.
Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of myself, Lieutenant General Cederholm, the Deputy Commandant for Aviation, and Rear Admiral Loisel, the Director of Air Warfare, thank you for the opportunity to appear today to address the Department of the Navy's fiscal year 24 budget request for Rotary Wing aviation programs. We are pleased to testify alongside our Department of the Army colleagues. The Navy and Marine Corps forces provide a persistent forward maritime presence that sustains U.S. power projection throughout the world and conduct a broad range of military missions to support our joint force. The Department's rotorcraft capability is a key enabler of our naval mobility. When coupled with our air-capable ships, these aircraft provide speed, range, and flexibility to give our nation unmatched versatility, global reach, and expeditionary agility. Rotorcraft transport Marines, sailors, equipment, and supplies from ships and land bases. Rotorcraft pilots make up more than 50% of our naval aviators, who support a broad range of missions from assault support and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance and targeting, to humanitarian and disaster assistance. The Navy's MH-60 Romeos are a prime example of this, delivering anti-submarine warfare and anti-surface warfare capabilities to clear the water space and allow our carrier strike groups to move unimpeded to accomplish their missions. Similarly, the CH-53 Echo and MH-53 Echo continue to execute our Navy and Marine Corps warfighting concepts by providing capable heavy lift and performing as an airborne mine countermeasures platform. Thanks to the successful H-53 reset initiative that has returned fully mission-capable aircraft to our fleet. The Department of Navy's 24 budget request supports these capabilities as outlined in the Chief of Naval Operations Vision for Distributed Maritime Operations and the Commandant's Force Design 2030 Strategic Initiative. The budget requests funding for procurement of 88 fixed-wing, rotary wing, and unmanned aircraft, including 15 CH-53 kilos. These 53 kilos will be procured, as mentioned, under a block buy authority provided by Congress in the 23 National Defense Authorization Act. And with funding for 99 53 kilos across the FIDIP, we will significantly enhance the heavy lift capability of the Marine Corps and the Joint Force. While no procurement funding is requested in 24, the production lines for the VH-92 presidential helicopter and the TH-73A training helicopters are active and predictably building and delivering aircraft. The presidential Hilo program is in the middle of White House commissioning process, and the initial operational capability, or IOC, of the Advanced Helicopter Training System was declared earlier this year. The FY23 budget also looks to the future, continuing R&D investments and working with our service partners to support future vertical lift family of systems. This includes the Navy's Future Vertical Lift Maritime Strike and the Marine Corps' Vertical Takeoff and Landing family of systems. This portfolio will close key warfighting gaps and provide transformational capabilities when legacy rotary platforms reach their service life beginning in the 2030s. As we continue to focus on today's maritime challenges, we look forward ahead to tomorrow's evolving security environment. We thank Congress and this subcommittee for your continued leadership and support of the Navy Marine Corps team. And we look forward to your questions, sir.
Mr. Stephanie, thank you. And again, thank you to our witnesses. Secretary Bush, I'd like to begin with you and talk about the improved turbine engine program. We know it was originally scheduled for the fall of 2022. It then moved further to the right, and now we understand it's moving in even further to the right into fiscal year 2024 without definition as to even where it's going to fall there. This is critical not just for the upgrades to the Black Hawk and the Apache, but it's also incredibly important for FARA. And the question then becomes, how does this affect the testing and development and decision-making for FARA? Will it be delayed by the equal amount of time that we see in the engine delay? What will we be doing going forward? And how can you mitigate the delays that we now have before us with ITEP?
Yes, sir. So I think, and I agree, yes, it's a critical program. The delays are certainly disappointing. The nature of the delays, as I understand them, really relate to quality control at sub-vendors within, General Electric's vast, vendor base, where they've had trouble making some new components, including with some new methods like 3D printing, to the level of quality required for engines that we can actually put in test aircraft. I've had many engagement with GE on that. They believe they have it under control. My team of experts believes their current estimates are reasonable, but it is a delay. So to answer your question there, the engine delay combined with the ongoing analysis of alternatives for FARA have delayed the program approximately 8 months. The milestone B is now planned for first quarter of fiscal year 26.
Very good. Well, let me dig down a little bit deeper. Then you talked about the AOA, the assessment of alternatives or analysis of alternatives for FARA, and it's alarming to me that those haven't been done to this point. To me, that should have been done earlier in the process, and we're seeing that being delayed now. Give us an idea about how that's going to unfold with how you do the analysis of alternatives. Does that affect where we are? So if at this particular point with as much investment that's been made, which is now about $2 billion, what if an AOA shows that there is a better alternative? It seems like we've spent an awful lot of money if we end up in a different place. And if that's the case, I don't want to repeat the same challenges the Army went through with Comanche. How do we look at not having this a predetermined outcome since it's taken place now rather than in 2019, which is probably when it should have first started?
Yes, sir. So the reason it's underway now is until fairly recently, the Army and the Department of Defense had not decided what acquisition pathway FARA would follow. Once the decision was made for it to go back to at Milestone B, a traditional program approach, the AOA is required to get through Milestone B unless waived by the Defense Acquisition Executive, and that has not taken place. So to be fair to my predecessors, I believe there was hope at the time to be able to go perhaps earlier to a Milestone C type approach, or even perhaps rapid fielding. But based on where the program is and the technology, we decided the more responsible approach would be to go to a traditional Milestone B, which requires the AOA. The AOA, sir, is advisory.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the decision on moving forward in that Milestone B will belong to Dr. LaPlante, advised by the Army and CAPE and others. I think I'm confident, though, that the AOA, the way it's structured, is fair. It is very thorough. It is examining many alternatives. I think that's good.
Yes.
I think the Army has an excellent case, and General McCurry can go into the Army's thoughts behind our particular approach. So while these delays to FAR are a bit of a concern, I do believe that once we push through to the Milestone B and get ITEP, we'll know more later this year. We can come back with everything we know, of course, on a sustainable track to get us test engines for the FARA rapid prototyping events that are the conclusion of those pre-programmed things you mentioned. I think we will be in a good place to know exactly where things are going to land in terms of the program schedule.
Okay. So you're confident that if the AOA shows further considerations or even maybe a little bit different track than we're currently on, that you feel under Milestone B that we can accomplish that and not have any significant delays to the program?
Sir, I think if the Milestone B occurs on time, I think at that point we will have enough data to, and we are required, of course, not just come up with a program baseline schedule, which could somewhat delay, depending on where we are, production activities, but also the cost estimate. So we will have a fully baked, normal OSD required cost and schedule baseline that members will be able to track through the traditional processes at that point.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Lieutenant General Cedarholm, I wanted to touch base with you on where the Marine Corps is moving out on unmanned efforts there on reconnaissance missions using rotary winged aircraft, and get your perspective on how you believe you're going to be able to accomplish this mission with an unmanned platform versus a manned platform. Give us your perspective there. I know as Force Design 2030 lays out and you're looking to be able to maximize the opportunities there. We've seen a little bit with what's happened with Scout in the Navy and that program being terminated. Is there a learning process that you've gone through with what the Navy's done to look at what the role would be for an unmanned platform there? So give me your perspective on where you see the Marine Corps being on an unmanned platform for reconnaissance versus a manned platform.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think I copied down in your opening, sir, ISR as a cost-effective, high-performance solutions for unmanned in the ISR arena and the logistics arena especially. To get after your question, sir, I would also add some traits or attributes to unmanned that are very enticing to the United States Marine Corps, which is a global reach and persistence presence around there. So with that in mind, sir, as you know, we've transitioned from the RQ-21 to the MQ-9 Alpha, and MQ-9 Alpha right now, as we speak, is doing maritime domain awareness for real-world operations. And the great thing about the MQ-9 Alpha, and it gets after your comments, Chairman, is the fact that it knows no geographical combatant commander boundaries. So, and couple that with long endurance and global reach, and you have a very capable platform. With regards to the Marine Corps' plan for the future with regards to an unmanned, sir, our VTOL family of systems, vertical takeoff and landing family of systems, has 3 lines of effort to it, sir. The first one is logistics. So we're looking at a risk-worthy unmanned logistics connector, and we're in the process of developing and working through our process initial capabilities requirement document right now that's gone through and sitting at the MROC for decision. The second line of effort, Mr. Chairman, is attack strike. So we have taken a different approach because of the, I think the ranking member talked about we're at different stages of modernization. The Marine Corps is in a unique position, a good one. The relative health of our fleet and the nascent age of our fleet of H-1s, MV-22s, we're just transitioning to the 53 kilos you brought up, gives us an opportunity to, in the future, not wait, but very expeditiously and thoroughly explore the intersection points between budget requirements and future capabilities. And we can look at, in the attack strike role, sir, we can look at such things as what are the advances in teaming, autonomy, advances in lethality, survivability, to go back to the ranking member's comments. So that's our second line of effort. And then our third line of effort going forward is to replace our extant platforms like the MV-22 when it ages out with the next-gen assault support. So I'm excited at where the Marine Corps is. We have a sense of urgency, but we also have time to be thorough in our approach to unmanned in the future, sir, and I'm excited at what we're going to deliver in the VTOL family of systems.
Very good. Thanks, Lieutenant General Cedarholm. And now I'm going to yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Bush, I just want to follow up with the opening comments concerning the Chinook, the Block F. What was originally envisioned going back 7 years, and what we will be doing with the Chinook and what is happening now. Certainly there's been a bit of a pause, to say the least. The night court, this is where we first learned what minimum sustaining rates were and what they weren't, and what, quite frankly, we're not sure where they were. So we look at the facility up outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, and those 1,100 workers, they have the V-22, which is winding down. And right now, we're in a pause waiting for a decision on where the Army's going with the Chinook. It has proven itself time and time again. We understand the pause has gone through. Would you share with us where we are and where are we going to be over the course of next year, keeping in mind that industrial base, which is not unique to this facility, but across the spectrum, is of real concern?
Yes, sir, and let me lead with the Army does recognize the importance of that industrial base, and especially the human capital aspect of it. It's vital. As we've talked about before, this is a calendar year 2023 decision, which really makes it a fiscal year 25 decision from the Army. That's the budget we're building right now. The budget request did include, once again, our 6 aircraft for Special Operations Forces. One thing that has changed is the good news that the German military has decided to buy the CH-47, approximately 70 or more aircraft, around that number, which gives us an opportunity to retain that workforce, whichever direction the Army ultimately goes. It buys us some more time. That being said, the aircraft that Congress has added for the Army to procure, we have procured and we are going to field. But I think at this time, it's a question of balancing resources across the entire Army. That is the question in front of senior Army leaders with regard to where this falls in that mix.
Well, certainly you've seen the plus up to try to keep this thing moving along over the past few years in Congress. I think was right in doing it. We understand time to make the decision, but certainly given the lack of a workforce across the nation, we want to make sure this keeps going, and hopefully the German piece can fit in quick enough so that they're not going to see that drop. Thank you. Let's flip over to the Marines. General, Force Design 2030. I've heard a lot about it. You and I had conversations before. We see what has gone on with the Marine Corps moving the F-35 aircraft from operational squadrons to backup inventory. So similar question dealing with the Rotary Wing regarding the AH-1 and the UH-1 fleet. The Marine Corps is elected to deactivate 2 operational squadrons. Will the Corps be able to meet its operational commitments and certainly be able to provide that support that would be needed by the combatant commanders? Walk us through that decision, and will we have enough for the commanders and certainly the operational commitments that we are already committed to?
Well, thank you, Ranking Member. Sir, the short answer to your question is yes, we will. We are slated in force design to go to 5 HMLAs. And just to give you a little bit of historic background in here, in 2007, we had 6 HMLAs. 2011, we went to 9. Then also in 2011, we went back to 8. We went down to 7 in 2016. So I would posit, sir, that organizational construct and composition of within squadrons, and I hate to use the word every TMS or always has fluctuated to meet the demands of the national security interests, but I think that it's safe to say that it has done so for H-1s in the past, sir, CH-46s, MV-22s, AV-8Bs, FA-18s, and even F-35s, as you alluded to, sir. So with regards to meeting our operational commitments, I can assure you that we are meeting the operational requirements out there for force employment and force management around the globe. Our primary unit for doing that is our Marine Expeditionary Units. This is not a cheap plug, but we've heard our Commandant say we need 31 amphibs, and I've heard Chairman, you say we put airplanes on those amphibs, so we can always use that to give combatant commanders more presence. But they are very happy with the current construct of capabilities that we provide from Marine Aviation. I would say going forward, Ranking Member Norcross, sir, that I can't speak for the combatant commanders, but what I've heard in testimony yesterday from Admiral Aquilino was that he was, when force design and as force design delivers capabilities, he's satisfied with that. My words, I think he said it a little stronger. I've heard General Walters endorse force design and the capabilities that those bring. I had the chance to work for General Walters last year at this time over in Eastern Europe as we brought to bear Marine VMFA and the TPS-80 world-class Gator radar. So I'm confident that our force design plans will meet the operational requirements of the combatant commanders. I think those are their words, not mine, sir. And we are always, to close out, sir, the Commandant's campaign of learning, we're always looking to make adjustments as we have, just like I mentioned the history of H-1 squadrons, sir. So I'm very confident that, yes, sir, we are meeting our operational requirements with high quality, unbelievably well-trained Marines and platforms, sir.
Appreciate it. Chairman, yield back.
Thank you, Don. We'll now go to Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, and I appreciate your all's expertise here today. I'm a 135 guy and a 130 guy by trade, so your world's a little different, but I appreciate you. To the Admiral, if I may, and is it LaSalle? Did I say your name right? Thank you. The MH-60 fleet is getting older, and all those service life extensions are underway. Some of us are worried about developing a replacement. Can you provide an update on the future vertical life maritime strike platform, and how are you working with the Army at all on that? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. So the future vertical lift analysis of alternatives is complete. It's been delivered to CAPE, and they are going through it right now for sufficiency. And so once they are done with that sufficiency assessment, then we will absolutely move on to selecting a preferred alternative for the Navy and all of the costing and acquisition documentation necessary to reach a milestone A, likely in about the 25 timeframe. So we're about 5 years behind the Army as far as an acquisition program goes with development of that. And that fits with when we expect service life to be expired in our Sierra and Romeo fleet. And so, so I do expect that program to continue. Now, with respect to learning from the Army and everything that they're doing, predominantly we'll look to doing that in mission systems and in ways that they've done that, because their FLRAA aircraft is too large for our destroyer decks, and FARA is going to be too small for our needs. So I don't see a direct correlation to our requirements to theirs. However, that does not mean we will not have numerous opportunities.
Where you can, it makes sense. Granted, I know you have different requirements, but hopefully there could be some leveraging of their experience. General McMurray, can you explain the difference between the active and National Guard combat aviation brigades? We understand that they're organized and equipped differently. We're trying to make sense of it.
Congressman, thanks for the question. So as I said, I represent all of the components. So as we look at end strength and force structure, there's always trade-offs. And years back, 2014 timeframe was the last time we restructured those brigades, and it was an attempt to get the greater access to attack and reconnaissance platforms to support the heel-to-toe rotations at the time. As you know, we have the 4 battalions of attack aircraft in the Army National Guard now. They're being modernized ahead of some of the active component and will be complete before the active component with Echo Model AH-64. And that's really the primary difference between those formations as we go forward.
Thank you. A follow-on question. Are you finding lessons learned from Ukraine and how on helicopter operations? And can you share with us some of your lessons learned and observations?
Absolutely, Congressman. So I reside under Training and Doctrine Command, and under Training and Doctrine Command in the Army also is the Center for Army Lessons Learned. So inextricably linked to observing things around the world, including Europe and what's going on there. And as we look at those things, with Ukraine specifically, it's not uniform. There's been a few different phases of the operation, and things that we observe during one phase might be different during another. With regard to rotary wing operations there, I think it's important to note that we are equipped differently thanks to the gracious and generous support of you all and the taxpayers, but we also train and operate much differently. If you look at the altitudes, for instance, that people fly, if you look at the times of day or night that people are flying, significantly different. And so when I consider, rotary wing survivability, I'm often quoted out there in the force as 80% of that occurs left of launch. In other words, having a common understanding of the threat, the terrain, your own capabilities does a lot to make you survivable. And actually, it helps make the combined arms team as a whole more survivable to have you in the air. So that's kind of what we're looking at as we look at those observations.
You see potential lessons here just because it's involving Russia, one of our primary potential adversaries. So whatever we can glean from what they're doing, the better. But thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. Now we'll go to Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses again for your excellent testimony here today. Mr. Bush, earlier this morning, I had an exchange with Secretary Wormuth and General McConville. Obviously, the GAO decision is not going to be contested any further. So I would just note at the outset that doesn't mean Congress's oversight is going to end. There are a whole host of issues that I think still kind of scream out for questions in the future. I'm not going to sort of dive into that too much, but I would note that Admiral Loisel's comment about the size of the wingspan of the Valor not being, aligned with certainly the sea services. I would just note, I think the size of that wingspan is also not aligned with existing hangar infrastructure, both overseas and at home, and that's certainly something that certainly with our MILCON oversight is going to be a topic in the future. But Secretary Wormuth did confirm that the plan is not to have a one-for-one replacement for the Valors for Blackhawks. And again, just quickly, do you agree with that comment that she made this morning?
Sir, I do, but I think it's a preliminary. We, of course, don't have a nailed-down number we are planning
That was
to
my
procure
next question.
yet.
So at this point, that we don't have a number in terms of the size of the acquisition?
Not a final decision yet, sir. We would have a initial solid estimate at milestone B. That's next year.
So we have to wait till next year to get a clearer idea in terms of the numbers?
A definitive number, yes, sir. But I believe her statement was accurate that if you just look at the size of today's Black Hawk fleet, it will not be one for one.
So given that fact, looking and moving forward, and she confirmed this, and so did General McConville, the Blackhawks are going to be around for a while. The first Valor doesn't even roll off until 2030. So can you talk a little bit about what you see as the acquisition strategy of the Army, both in terms of modernization of Blackhawks as well as acquisition?
Yes, sir. So the first thing we did was nail down our multi-year contract for Black Hawk production that's been in place since last year and continues through 2026. that will ensure stability in the production line for the near term. In the far term, sir, we are thinking through options about what kind of work could be done there to maintain the industrial base, the supply part base, all the things you need for a healthy fleet that's going to be in the Army for decades, as the Secretary-in-Chief indicated. We're open to talking with Congress and your ideas on that, but I do believe there are opportunities for different kinds of work at that facility with that workforce that I think could achieve that objective. Another factor we are hoping for is, of course, continued strong foreign military sales, which would be an ideal way to balance the two factors, reduce how much the Army has to invest, but maintain the goodness of the industrial base and the workforce. But we can't count on that exclusively. So, sir, we are open to members' ideas on how to proceed there, and that's certainly something we're looking at in our fiscal year 25 discussions.
Good. Well, again, I'm sure you'll have a very vigorous dialogue with members in terms of that issue. Mr. Stephanie, back in December, Navy approved full rate production for the CH-53 King Stallion and also in NDAA last year. We created authorities to allow for block buy. So how do you, given the fact that block buy has really been a really successful contracting model, what's your take in terms of that actually becoming a reality?
Yes, sir.
General contentment.
So the 2-year block buy has enabled us to negotiate equipment with both the engine maker, GE, as well as Sikorsky, and we by doing 2 years at once, we've been able to get a better deal in both those cases. The production line is set up. I was up in Sikorsky not too long ago and saw the actual production line that's going to be used going forward. So I think we're in a good place in the 25 budget cycle to look at a long-term, 4-year, 5-year, multi-year type approach, working inside the department to see if that's the right answer. I know Lockheed and Sikorsky are willing to invest in cost reduction efforts if we are able to give them a long-term deal like that. So I think we're all set up to make that decision as part of the 25 cycle. But I'm optimistic we can have roughly 100 aircraft multi-year procurement going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. Then we'll now go to Dr. McCormick.
Finally, Congress is addressing something both interesting and exciting, which is the vertical lift component of aviation. And for the record, sir, I'd like to point out that to fly is heavenly, but to hover is divine.
That's
I'd like to start off with Lieutenant General Cedarholm, if I could, please. General, I'm prepared for you once again, and I just wanted to open up with a quick question. It stood out to me that your number 2 unfunded priority was the CH-53 Kilo. As a former 53 Echo pilot, I understand that there's an incredible heavy lift component to our Marine Corps. My first question is, why isn't it number 1 in your priorities? And what is the 53 Kilo going to bring to your capabilities, and why are we short-funded right now?
Sir, thank you, and I did notice that the red crayons are missing in there, so I'm not going to accuse you of eating them, sir, but we've gone through this before, so I thank you. Thanks for the question, sir. The UPL number 2 for us is CH-53K initial and outfitting spares. And the Commandant's taken an approach this year. The UPL is an accelerant to force design. So if it was important to us, we put it into our main PB-24 submission. And we did exactly that with CH-53K spares going forward. As you know, anytime you have a nascent program, spares always seem to be at a shortage. So the Commandant, to accelerate force design, put it as number 2 to include, to add on to the 53K spares that we've embedded in our PB-24 submission. Your point's well taken, sir, but the number 1 on there is an LPD, and the Commandant, again, utilizing the UPL just as accelerants to force design. That is the only difference, because that's a statutory requirement set by the Commandant. That's number 1, and I stood no chance of winning that argument, sir, inside of that.
I'm sure you fought hard for me.
Yes, sir.
With that, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a question for my chief, who's an Army helicopter pilot. To the Honorable Mr. Bush, actually, Recently, we got educated that the Vertical Lift Research Centers of Excellence, which has been established for a good long period, hasn't really had an increase in funding for about 40 years. It exists at Georgia Tech, my alma mater, for a pre-med. And I'm wondering, is that going to inhibit our development of future rotary wing aviation if we don't increase the budget for that?
Sir, I must say I am not familiar with the exact numbers you're talking about. I do know that across all of our research and development and S&T work, the work at the universities is critical. If I could work with your staff to refine that question and give you a very precise answer on what might have happened, and then what the risks might be, I would like to be able to do that as a
Sure.
follow-up,
Just
sir.
to clarify, for the last about 40 years, we haven't increased that budget, and it's how we develop that new technologies in vertical lift, which I'd like to see increase, just 'cause I think it's a critical component of our military lift.
I'd be happy to dive into that, sir.
Great. Follow on for Major General Curry. Very pleased to see the Army has identified the AH-64 Echo as a number one priority for its enduring aviation fleet modernization. Hard to overstate the capacity. My chief obviously wrote this. Of these systems provide in terms of the battlefield autonomy, independent fires, and sensing and making sense in real time. Given the critical role of this aircraft for the next possibly 30 years, can you provide the committee with the status update on your Apache modernization efforts?
Yes, Congressman, thank you. So, the Apache H-64 Echo is the best attack helicopter in the world. We also have the second best attack helicopter in the world, the H-64 Delta. So, I happen to fly them myself, and I have a child that flies the Apache. So I'm pretty committed to maintaining the safety and lethality of that platform. Specifically, in FY24, we saw the need for a couple of things as we looked at maintaining the relevance of the H-64, and we increased our mods line by 32% in the FY24 request for H-64, specifically focused on getting after, a couple of things, improved tail rotor, coyote modem, and some Link 16 capabilities as those things change. So we're committed to doing that. As we manage all of our current fleets, we are looking hard at all of those issues that come up, whether it's obsolescence or safety, so that as we balance, I talked earlier, future and current readiness, as we balance that, we're focused on those things. That's what targeted modernization means as we get after those items.
Thank you for your like-mindedness, and with that, I yield, sir. Semper Fi.
Dr. McCormick, thank you so much. And let the record reflect that of all the members of this committee, the only individual that properly pronounced rotary wing was you. So I think the rest of us had been eating your crayons while... So thanks again, Dr. McCormick. We appreciate that. Now we'll go to Mr. Carvajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses here today. I was enlisted, so we play with other real toys at the front of the spear, not those toys in the rear. Rotary wing aviation is critical to our readiness across all geographic combatant commands. We are making substantial investments to modernize different rotary wing platforms. Taxpayers are spending billions on these modernization efforts. Mr. Stephanie and Mr. Bush, can you explain the need to modernize our systems and describe the steps being taken to keep those modernization efforts on schedule and within a reasonable budget?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. So I think the chief, I could never say it as eloquently as he has laid out, expressed really the vision for the type of aviation leap in capability we're trying to achieve with our new platforms in terms of speed, range, and overall capability, and working with unmanned aircraft as part of a new way to fight in the air. General McCurry could add more detail if you'd like. In terms of what we're doing, I think one of the issues I touched on earlier, if you look at our big aviation platform programs, both of them, while we have new authorities that have let us go faster early on in those programs, we are being very deliberate and honestly conservative as we go into the full development of those programs to get to production to ensure success from an acquisition standpoint. So while the Army has been comfortable using, for example, rapid fielding with something like a rifle, We did not feel that was appropriate here with aircraft of this complexity and importance. So that's one way we are mitigating risks, sir, is now it is the, I would say, the old way to do it, but we are using within that every innovation we can, and we have aggressive timelines. So I think we have the right balance there in terms of our approach to ensure success for these critical programs for the Army.
Thank you. Mr. Stephanie?
Yes, building on that, key enablers of the modernization is communication and an integrated environment and acting as a manned, unmanned team or an integrated team. So whether it's mission systems or link systems, making sure that is well thought out and well engineered before we head into the next set of acquisition programs or the next set of modernization programs is a key for me. Making sure we go through a rigorous but timely trade-off AOA type process to make sure we know what we're buying before we go and make a major investment in modernization will probably be the other major area I'm interested in, sir.
Thank you. General Cedarholm, General McCurry, and Admiral Loisel. This is a three-part question. How would you assess the state of the Rotary Wing Aviation Industrial Base? What challenges concern you the most? And are there any lingering or lasting effects from the pandemic that are causing development or acquisition problems?
Sir, I'd like to start that train answer for you. With regards to assess the state of the Rotary Wing Industrial Base, obviously we are concerned about that as we move forward with the CH-53K and we explore further into the VTOL family of systems that I mentioned earlier, sir. So we have our eye on that. We also stand to benefit in this case, though, of having bought out the program of records for our H-1s, our Hueys, and our Cobras. We also have to stand the benefit of having just bought out in PB-23 our last MV-22. So the industrial base concerns, while at the forefront of our thought process going forward with VTOL family of systems and 53 kilo, is manageable from our perspective. The challenges that we see right now to the Marine Corps, sir, are going to be adherence to delivery timelines, and it ties into the third part of your question, sir, which is what lingering effects are we seeing to supply chain? We are seeing those. It has affected the delivery of our CH-53K timelines, but in close unison, we are working closely with Sikorsky, the program managers, and the fleet to ensure that we can close those gaps as best we can. Those efforts are ongoing. I'm very happy with those, and the Commandant's been directly involved in those as well. And I'll turn it over to my fellow patriots, sir, to answer their part of that question. Go ahead.
Congressman, I think, first of all, I would say we have great industry partners across all of our platforms, all of the tiers underneath the OEMs. We have great partners that are always in dialogue with us and have been tremendous. I think as we look at more opportunities for manned-unmanned teaming on the battlefield, the things that manned platforms do well versus unmanned platforms, it opens up different sectors of the industrial base. So I think that there is an opportunity to invigorate different parts of the industrial base as we move forward with these efforts. The largest challenges for me as the Aviation Force Mod proponent is exactly that balance of future readiness and current readiness, and how, keeping the force ready from now till 2030 and then providing future readiness for threats that emerge after that is where we put that needle is critical. And I think the third question on the pandemic, Mr. Bush eloquently described the impact to ITEP and some of the things that happened at the production there. And I think it's especially poignant on our second and third tier smaller providers out there as they don't have the depth that some of the OEMs do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Barber Hall. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to Mr. Lolota.
Thanks, Chairman. As a former helicopter control officer on an Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate and a tactical action officer on a Nimitz class aircraft carrier, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today to discuss rotary wing aviation and future vertical.
Another proper pronunciation, man. That Navy Marine Corps team's got it, don't
Who could ever get that wrong, Chairman? Long Island, where I'm from, is home to one of the largest aerospace and defense clusters in the world. We have over 250 companies and over 24,000 workers on Long Island. And I'm proud to represent such a large portion of our defense industrial base and want to ensure that it will flourish for years to come. My district is also home to the 106th Rescue Wing with the Air National Guard, and the 106, as you probably understand, provides personnel recovery, combat search and rescue capability, expeditionary combat support, and civil search and rescue support to federal and state authorities. Gentlemen, I want to use my time to bring up an issue that has come to my attention with the 106th. It has recently come out that the Air Combat Command is considering cutting the total number of Air National Guard HH-60 aircraft from 18 to 16, resulting in the 106th Rescue Wing losing one of their HH-60 aircrafts in the future. If this decision is confirmed, it would greatly, directly, negatively affect operational readiness in the 106th Rescue Wing. And to me, it's difficult to comprehend how we can expect our services to include the 106th Rescue Wing to continue to effectively and efficiently complete their missions if they're getting shortchanged on vital assets. And gentlemen, I understand that there's not an Air National Guard representative in this panel, and I don't expect that you prepared for this aspect today, but I also understand this issue is not unique to other services as well. Does anybody have any insight to it? And again, if you don't, I understand. Assuming not, Mr. Stephanie and Mr. Bush, can you commit to bringing this issue back to your DoD counterparts for a proper response to the subcommittee?
Yes, sir, we'll take that for the action.
Awesome.
For the record.
Yes, sir, same. We'll talk to the Air Force.
Appreciate it. And my other question for anybody who would like to answer it is, are the services communicating with your respective Air Combat Commands organizations within your respective services to ensure their operational needs are being met on issues like this?
Congressman, I can speak for Army Aviation as we talk from the institutional level to the operational force. So we have several forums where we meet with Corps, Division, and Aviation Brigade commanders. We do a quarterly warfighting forum specifically where those commanders bring their concerns forward, and we review some of their performance at the combat training centers. That's frequently where we garner input into things. I would also say, as we, with the advent of Army Futures Command and some of the approaches we've taken to the modernization priorities, the increased use of soldier touch points has made early injects into how a soldier might use this or the challenges they might have using a piece of material.
Great.
Sir, I would just add from a Marine Corps perspective that we stand the advantage of being a smaller, streamlined service. I know that I have daily interactions with the FMF, and I hear their concerns, and I can inject them as an interlocutor, both into the budgetary cycle and outside of the budgetary cycle to take on emergent issues. So the communication is extremely tight. It's streamlined, it's effective, and it's fast. But we are happy but not satisfied, and we will endeavor to continue to streamline those communications to give our best to those men and women who fly and service our airplanes, sir.
Yeah, the subcommittee appreciates that, General. Mr. Stephanie, Mr. Bush, I do look forward to your response regarding the 106th. Chairman, I yield back.
Go to Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't here. Maybe some of these questions have been answered before. Is our current air power prepared for a potential peer conflict? And what are the sources of friction that we're facing that are hindering our preparedness?
Congressman, I think that the assessment would be there are challenges on the horizon. We see those. Earlier I was discussing observations from Europe and things we're seeing with capabilities in the unmanned and manned arenas and the different ways we need to operate. So I think that today we are taking those observations and applying them to the current fielded force. As we look on the horizon, there are challenges out there. I would say there's a huge growth in electronic warfare and the ability to disrupt some of the things we've become comfortable using on the battlefield. And so those are all things that we look at as we look at new platforms and how we get around that.
Sir, if I could just add one thing. For example, aircraft survivability equipment. So that's it's a moral obligation to have effective, as it can be, aircraft survivability equipment on our deployed forces. This budget adds funding to that. There are also some classified efforts that I'd be happy to come back and brief you on, where we are trying to fundamentally change that cycle to make sure we can stay ahead of all threats in the aviation space. But that is an example of the kind of thing we have to do to adapt to what we're seeing in Ukraine and what we might see in a conflict in the Pacific.
Okay, thank you. And what have been the greatest challenges to aircraft procurement? Why is the process of developing and stationing new aircraft so slow when the potential of a significant peer threat has the possibility of occurring in the very near future? And it's something I've been frustrated not only with DOD, but other agencies, that it takes forever and a day to develop aircraft or to, I guess, envision new aircraft and bring those new aircraft on the production line and bring them into service. In World War II, we went from a Wildcat to a Mustang in like 4 years, and at the end of that, just outside that envelope, we had jet aircraft already. So I guess war dictates that you got to do things a lot quicker, but you know, we seem to be taking decades to develop aircraft around here. What can we do to speed that process up?
I'll go first. So, sir, it's a great observation. I believe there's a couple factors. One is the Army, of course, has to balance resources between maintaining our effective current aircraft, which does require resources to modify them and to make sure they can go to war today, because that is our requirement. And I believe it would be irresponsible to move too far away from that task to pursue the future. However, I believe the Army's current budget and projections show us accepting some risks to go faster. So exactly what you're talking about, sir. I think the general rule with aviation aircraft in the Army, you know, you're looking at normally about 5 years to develop. I think that's there's a lot of reasons for that that my engineers could come and talk you through. I think often a constraint with production is simply, again, balancing resources between maintaining what you have and getting the new thing into production.
Are we staying ahead of our potential adversary, the one in the Far East, in what they're trying to do or what they're developing and what we're developing?
Sir, I believe the Army's budget will enable us to stay ahead if we succeed with these modernization efforts.
Okay, thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Menez. We're going to do a second round of questions if our witnesses can spend a few more minutes with us. Rear Admiral Loisel, I want to talk to you a little bit about the issues that you all are addressing with the MH-60 Romeo and Sierra. I know that the Sierra helicopters are going to undergo also service life extension as well as the Romeos. That's been pushed out to the right, though, so it looks like that probably won't be completed until 2035. The question is, we know the role for the Romeos in anti-submarine warfare. The Sierras, I think, are more about doing more of the logistical sorts of missions, moving things back and forth. I know that the service life extensions are going to go into survivability, targeting systems, and radar improvements. I want to get your perspective, since it now looks like the service life extensions are going to be pushed out significantly to the right because of delays in modernization for the Navy. Do you envision that as the C-2 squadrons are replaced with V-22s, that the V-22 aircraft might now assume a multi-mission role from both the mission that the C-2s perform, but also mission potentially that the Sierras perform, as we look at how we bridge that gap? Even with service life extensions, I think we get like another 7 years out of the aircraft. So do you envision that being a bridge to the modernization for the rotary wing platform there that the Sierras perform now?
Sir, to a couple things on the SLEP. First, it is ongoing with the Romeo. It's a 2,000-hour extension from about 10 to 12,000 hours. And you're correct on about the 7-year-ish life frame there. And then Romeo will follow because we bought those later.
Right.
And it's not so much, we just don't need to do those yet, largely because we have some extra Romeos that are still in preservation that are new production.
Okay.
And so that will help get us into the 30s timeframe when we're going to do slip-on Romeos if that's required. Now, to your question on CMV 22, thanks to Congress, we got to our complete warfighting requirement last year of 48. And so what the Air Boss has asked us to do right now is to take a look at the concept of operations for CMV 22 to ensure that we have it right. And it's not so much about whether or not we would replace Sierra capabilities or Romeo capabilities, but looking at contested logistics. And so typically speaking right now, we'll have a beach detachment of CMVs that support that. And so the problem is that Transcom takes all of our stuff to a central point of location. And then right now, in a non-combat environment, we have the ability to also have them take it to where the CMVs are. Right. In a combat environment, that may not be the case. And so what we're going to take a hard look at is whether or not there is additional utilization of CMVs that might help our C-130 fleet move that cargo to where the CMVs are located.
Yeah, because it seems like to me the CMVs do, as you look at ConOps there, they do have the potential versus the C-2s to do some of that Sierra mission, which can take a little pressure off of that and give you maybe some more life or a different framework as far as schleps on the Sierras.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, very good. Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Bush, just want to follow up with the FLAR. The GAO released a report and expressed concerns about the Army's schedule risk assessment, as well as the Army demonstrating some of the technologies, the prototype doing it virtually versus physically. Can you give us the assessment and as well as the GAO recommendations going towards that?
I can, sir. I'm well aware of the report. I believe I would characterize the report as a difference of opinion on cost estimating methodology. When you dive into it, for example, on page 13, and I'll quote from the report, it says, acquisition offices which within the FEL portfolio developed cost estimates and schedules in accordance with Army policies and applicable acquisition pathways, but inconsistently applied GAO leading practices for these estimates. So the Army followed all policies and laws. GAO has its own particular view of how those estimates should be done, and that's fine, but they don't make policy. I have to follow the laws and policies I have. That said, we will of course take GAO's thoughts into consideration to make sure we're doing the best cost estimates we can. Sir, with regard to some of their concerns about what technology is ready when, they, in some places in the report, appear to expect us to have things before milestone B that we would normally not have until before milestone C. So, while of course we would want as much advanced, testing to happen earlier in a program, that's not required and really not appropriate. So again, I think it's almost a difference, a distinction without a difference. I didn't take that much from the report. I believe, and I'm very confident, we are following all policies and regulations with regard to how we're approaching these acquisition programs. I'm happy to talk with you more about that offline, sir, but I think in this case, also GAO is kind of holding us to the traditional program structures while we are trying to use new program structures.
Sure.
And it's fine that they have an opinion about that, but we are doing things a bit differently, and that was their view, I guess.
There are many types of aircraft and certainly models that virtually is a great way of reducing that risk until you can actually get the physical piece. So in itself, it doesn't make it bad. Just certainly want to get your view on it.
Yes, sir. And in this case, of course, with FLAR, we've been flying through the demonstration program for many, I think more than we've ever done before, starting a milestone B. So I believe we've actually gone above and beyond in terms of real prototyping in this case, sir.
Thank you. Just real quickly, because it has come up earlier. So this is across all the services, your top priority for survivability. And are the systems fully funded in this year's budget? Let's go right down the line.
Ranking Member Norcross, the systems are fully funded for FY24. As Mr. Bush stated, we increased aircraft survivability funding this year for the Army. And as I stated earlier, survivability of the aircraft is really for survivability of the crew, the mission, and the Combined Arms team. And so there's a lot more into it than just the ASC. Hopefully the ASC is the in extremis portion of survivability.
Yes.
Sir, short answer for the United States Marine Corps, yes, sir, it is.
Terrific.
Sir, my highest priority right now is taking the lessons learned from a previous accident about aircrew survivability equipment on their person and going after lightweight body armor. Those are funded in the budget.
Thank you. I yield back.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for your perspective on where we are with rotary wing aircraft. Appreciate that. I think I can actually get those words out of my mouth now. So after I digested those crayons, so I think we're in in a good place. But again, thank you all so much. We'll continue the conversations. I think there are challenges ahead, but I am confident that we are in a position to meet those challenges. So thank you, and our subcommittee hearing is adjourned.